Hey y'all, I'm sure nobody's tuned in yet, but a lot of you guys are going to look in the future. This is Matt Davis. I'm hanging out here in the back alley. You might even be able to hear the sirens right behind Main Street Crossing. It's a Saturday night. What's today?
It's March 3rd.
March 3rd, 2018. If you don't know what Main Street Crossing is, we're the coolest live music venue up in the north part of Houston. And we bring
all of Houston.
All of Houston. We bring in all kinds of cool bands, everything from solo artists that are just starting or solo artists that are legends to some of the greatest tribute bands in the world. We bring,
national
touring acts. And so tonight we have one of our very favorites. All right. Hi, Larry. Larry just said hi there. I'm hanging out with. What am I calling you?
You can call me Joe.
Okay, I didn't know where you were going to
Paul.
I didn't know if you were going to try to be in character. I'm hanging out with Joe from the Fab5, and if you don't know who the Fab5 is or are, whatever's the right way to say that, I guess it is. Fab5 is.
Fab5, is.
Okay,
28 years.
They are
this month
the best Beatles tribute in the world. I swear, and I've looked them all up. Shut up, Joe. I know you too well. Yes, Larry, this is the guy that plays Paul, and if you don't know, for y'all looking at this in the future, or if you log on, what a tribute band is, different than like a cover band. It's a cover band. Right. You know, they might get up and play a Leonard Skinner song, and then they play a Tom Petty song, and then they play a Four Non-Blondes song. A tribute band has an appreciation for some other legendary band.
That's correct.
And basically the whole thing, like it sounds, is a tribute to that. So they come in here and do like 3 hours of Beatles number one hits. It's fantastic.
And mind you, tribute bands are there's like two different categories. One would be to play the music and just do it as close as you can to the record, you know. And the other version of tribute band would be to look the part, have the same gear, same guitar, same amplifiers, mannerisms, all that kind of stuff. Doing it 100%. So there's different various tribute bands. I think they're all great because they're all playing the music live for some of these groups that don't exist anymore. But we're the kind that has to have the same guitars and the same amplifiers to get the exact same sounds. So yeah, we're geeks. We're the geeks of Beatle tribute bands.
It's super cool. They even do. Are y'all doing the dressing wardrobe changes today?
Oh yeah. Okay, every show.
So what they do usually is they do 3 sets. They come out for the first set, and they kind of go with the old school Beatles, like the Hard Day's Night kind of era.
Or the Ed Sullivan turtleneck,
Yeah, Ed Sullivan turtleneck, and they come out and they do that deal, and they play stuff like Hard Day's Night and I Want to Hold Your Hand and all that.
The 62 to 66 kind of years.
Then you guys come out in the Sgt. Pepper's gear.
Sgt. Pepper, which we do, then the 67, 68 kind of psychedelic rock.
And then you come out and do the kind of like the Let It Be years,
right?
Or whatever.
1969, 70, where either we'll come out where Chuck, who plays John, will come out in a white suit, or the military outfit, and I'll come out in a black suit, and Ringo will come out in something different, like the Rooftop, wearing a red shiny raincoat or something, and using the same guitars the Beatles actually used during those years. We'll have certain guitars to do the early years through 66. Psychedelic, we have the painted guitars, which we play, and then the later Abbey Road years, we have the Hofner bass and the stripped down Epiphone Casino and the Fender Rosewood Telecaster. We got to get the sound.
Well, when you really creep me out, we had met a couple times, and we hit it off right away.
Oh, you're a great guy.
And me and you specifically, but also the venue and the band and everything.
The best hair in the business.
Thank you. I'm going for the best hair in the business. That's my goal. Yes, Larry, you should have been here. He said, "Rest in peace, John and George," and I should have been at the show. Love those guys.
Happy birthday, George! February 25th.
You really freaked me out when. I think it was your 3rd time here, and I walked out. You were doing sound check, and you had a right-handed bass in your hand.
Yeah,
and I was like, wait a minute, I really thought you played left-handed. And you said, well, I play left-handed when I'm playing Beatles stuff, and then if I'm playing not Beatles stuff, I play right-handed.
Yeah, it's kind of.
So you're that much of a freak, man.
I'm pretty much a freak. Yeah, I'm ambidextrous. So depends on. The majority. Our regular show consists of all 60s music, not just Beatles. When we do. Parties and festivals and stuff like that. So owning over 60 vintage instruments, I like to bring quite a few out, and the left-handed bass, and I'll bring a right-handed Vox teardrop bass. And we do the Stone stuff, So it's I'm a geek. I'm a music geek.
You have a great band. So okay, we're gonna get to Beatles here.
Yeah.
All right. And so here's how I'm gonna start this off. I'm gonna talk about me for just a minute. All right. So all the way through junior high, I was either homeschooled or went to private schools. All right. So I wasn't getting a lot of public school influence, and so I grew up on my parents' music, what they liked, and my dad. When CD players like first came out and got cool, he went all out and got like
the whole collection.
No, not that yet. He got a whole downstairs there were speakers in every room.
Wow.
And they had a 100-disc changer or something like that in the bedroom. And my dad would listen to music all the time, and you could hear it in the kitchen, you'd hear it in the bedroom, you'd hear it everywhere downstairs. And
back then when CDs were $29.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad would listen. He would listen to James Taylor, and he would listen to the Association and to Neil Diamond, and the Beatles are his favorite of all time. So,
and speaking of James Taylor, the Beatles signed James Taylor and discovered him, and that's how he got a start. So
yeah, it's amazing. So that was. I grew up just with that music in my ears all the time, and I fell in love with the Beatles. And when I was about 10 or 11, I got paid $10 a week to mow the lawn. And by the way, we lived on 5 acres. So, but it was a riding lawnmower.
Wow, okay.
And so I would save all my money, and I would go buy when I fell in love with the Beatles, I would go buy Beatles CDs. And I started off with the early years. I mean, like Hard Day's Night was my first record. And I just started going through them, and I got to where I had like 12 or 13 albums, which for a kid that bought them all himself at 10 years old or 11 years old, it was pretty cool. And there was this place at the time in the Willowbrook Mall that was called Past and Presents.
Oh yeah, remember that place?
Remember the place?
Yeah.
And it had like and I would go there, and I had a Hard Day's Night shirt and
stand-up cardboard.
Oh yeah, stand-up cardboard things.
And
so I fell in love with the Beatles. I don't listen to them as much as I used to, but if you had to say like who has been the biggest part of your life in music, like who have you listened to the most time? I mean, it's the Beatles.
Yeah.
Like that's.
And if you ask any current artist, anybody, even people like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, they'll say, who was your greatest influence? And they'll say the Beatles. I mean,
they're the greatest of all time.
Melody, and in those 6 years, you listen to something off their first album, which would be, like All My Loving or I Want to Hold Your Hand. And 6 years later, they're doing, Let It Be and The Long and Winding Road. Is this the same band? It's amazing how they evolved in 6 years. And they just couldn't reproduce that music live. They grew so far ahead of what they were doing that they couldn't play live anymore. They couldn't replicate what they were writing, Now they could do it with tapes and loops and all that kind of stuff. But back in 1965 and 66 with playing in arenas with 55,000 people with no monitors, little 50-watt amplifiers like we're playing tonight.
Right, yeah.
They're playing to 50,000 people. People came just to see the Beatles, not to hear them. And they just decided not to tour anymore and just concentrate on writing great music and putting out great records, which they did,
So what's, according to Joe, what's the greatest Beatles record?
Oh God, to me it's a toss between.
There's no wrong answer.
There is no wrong answer. It's just like, what's your favorite, or what's your favorite of the day?
No, that's that's what I mean. Like, but like today, if I said, okay,
today would be Revolver. I would say
Revolver.
Revolver, which came out in 1966, which had Got to Get You Into My Life, Taxman, Tomorrow Never Knows, Eleanor Rigby. And just such great material, where that's the pinnacle album, where in 1966 it just come out, it was just released in April, I believe, and they went on tour in July and August here in the States, and they did not play one song off their new album. Why? Because it was impossible to do Eleanor Rigby or Tomorrow Never Knows or Got to Get You Into My Life with horns, Yellow Submarine with all the floating, all the cool noises you hear on the record. They just couldn't reproduce it live, so it just got to a point where they just played the old songs from years past. that album was the pinnacle album where they kind of changed and became a different band, I think. It started basically with Rubber Soul as well, because they were writing a little bit more.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
that's my second favorite.
Yeah,
by the
writing.
way. It's my second favorite.
They weren't writing about love, loving songs anymore. It was more, Think for Yourself and Norwegian Wood and Drive My Car and Nowhere Man and
I'll never forget the first time I had Drive My Car.
That's great.
I mean, it was just like my dad put that in. He had this. Yeah, he had this Lincoln Continental.
Wow.
He got a CD player in it, and he puts in that, and I just remember cruising down the road and going, "That is one of the coolest freaking songs I've ever heard in my life." And that was when I was a kid. That was my favorite song on the record. Yeah. Now it's not my favorite song on that record anymore. But exactly. I love Rubber Soul. I think it's absolutely amazing.
But if you listen to those LPs or CDs today, they sound as fresh as they did. For instance, if you listen to it today, it sounds like it was just recorded the other day. It's so clear and crisp. The technology was just incredible. George Martin, way ahead of his time.
Oh,
way
no
ahead
kidding.
of his time.
No
and they pushed him, to all the limits they could. I mean, John never really liked his voice, so for stuff like Tomorrow Never Knows, he wanted his voice to sound like he was, singing from the top of the Himalaya mountains, and George, make my voice sound that way. So they ran his voice through a Leslie speaker and, all these effects because the technology was there. They just pushed it, and no other band was doing that at the time,
Larry Shulin just messaged in here
and
said that Nowhere Man is a top 5 Beatles song.
Incredible. And if you, I know a little bit of history of Nowhere Man. I want to England.
I have no idea. I know nothing about it.
I went to England quite a few times, 2010 and 11, and got the chance to visit John's home in Weybridge called Kenwood. Home is still there, looks exactly the same as it did back in '66. You still feel John's presence there because, he lived there from '64 to when he met Yoko, '68. So majority of all the Beatles material that Lennon wrote, and even Paul, was written at the house. Paul would drive up from London, because he was the bachelor at the time, to the suburbs, and basically where John lived, Ringo lived right around the corner, and George was 10 minutes away. Paul lived in the city because of, he liked to stay in town. So, for instance, one night John was struggling had a song to write because they had to go to the studio the next day, and stayed up all night and couldn't think of anything to write, and he was frustrated. And in his music room, which was up in the attic on the 3rd floor, I've read that basically it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning where he just felt like a nowhere man living in a nowhere land, because it just couldn't come up with any material. So that's a song.
He made that
made that beautiful song. Wrote that song. The next day, I think they went into the studio.
Did he write it by himself, or did
wrote himself? Because it was 2 o'clock in the morning. He had a couple of pianos in his attic and a Mellotron and a couple of guitars, and would always have loop tapes and stuff like that. And I think the Lost Lennon tapes reflect a lot of these home recordings, where you hear a lot of these demos that he wrote before they actually went into the studio and record, And Paul would drive in, almost the same year, would drive up to go see John in the morning for a writing session, and John was sleeping. So Paul stayed in the backyard, which I happened to sit out there, and it was just beautiful. And I'm sitting out there thinking, wow, this is where Paul was waiting for John, and while John was sleeping for about an hour, and wrote Good Day Sunshine. And I can I can feel it by looking at these beautiful lush trees and lush gardens and the sun out. And I thought, wow, so many great songs were written here at this house that it's just amazing how these 2 guys would write all this material. And 50 years later, me and you here at Main Street Crossing in Tomball are talking about these brilliant songs 50 years later.
Me and my dad, I mentioned that's how I got into it, and we never get tired of talking about it. I mean, we've been talking about how amazing the Beatles were. We've been talking about that since I was 8 years old. Like, we still, every time we talk about it, just like in awe. Like when we start talking about how great a song is. So, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, or I'm asking you a question. aren't almost all the songs that those two guys wrote, didn't they just put everything as a co-write pretty much?
Yeah, that was their agreement. Was and a lot of it they you know,
were they really writing together sometimes?
Some of it they would. You know, like A Day in the Life is one of the songs where John came up with the idea of reading the newspaper. You know, I heard the news today, oh boy, and all this kind of stuff. And then Paul wrote the little middle bit because John was stuck on, you know, woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. You know, so that's a collaboration.
And what a weird,
really weird. I mean,
it was
really
so
weird,
cool,
really weird.
And I love that song. But such a strange transition there to go from
and Ticket to Ride is another one. They like to surprise people with their records. You know, so when John wrote Ticket to Ride, you know, it was great, you know, AM hit, fantastic, you know. And when it got to the end, you know, Paul came up with this bit of let's put a little extra song here at the end with My Baby Don't Care. It's you know, it's fading from another great song. It's like she's got a ticket to ride and she don't care. And then they go into the My Baby Don't Care thing. It's like brilliant. It's like
it was amazing, man.
Incredible stuff.
So why'd they break up? I mean, in your opinion?
In my opinion,
there's no factual. I mean,
they've known each other since they were kids, you know, 15, 14, you know, and they had to grow up. I mean, you know, they had to start families. You couldn't have a family, obviously, being in the Beatles. I mean, John's marriage didn't work out because he was always on the road, and Julian grew up pretty much without a father because John was never home. Paul didn't have children at that point. George didn't have children. Ringo had 2 small children towards the later end of the 60s, and then a third, you know, but they wanted to start a family, you know, and have a life, and they just grew apart. They wanted to do different types of music. George, you know, was coming up as a songwriter. The Beatles were always, you know, he was intimidated by John and Paul because look at their song output. George, you know, was learning from them and got to be his own great songwriter with Something and, you know, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and great material.
I make up a story in my own head that I don't know this to be true at all, but the story in my head, because everything that they cut of George's is amazing. I mean, there's no I mean, there's not really mediocre Beatles songs anyway, but everything. Right. I mean, he's got a couple of the best songs on Abbey Road.
I mean, agree. Here Comes the Sun is.
Yeah, it's
one
of the best songs.
We do it, and it's just one of my favorite songs, you know. But again, his songwriting evolved. I mean, from '64, writing a song like "You Like Me Too Much and I Like You," kind of very.
But they were all doing that though in '64.
Great melody.
Right.
But what is the song about? You know, and then it got to be "Think for Yourself," you know, and then he got into the Indian thing of "Life Goes On Within You and Without You." Wow, one of my favorite cuts off Sgt. Pepper, where people would skip it, you know, but now they've learned to. That's great stuff. I mean, it's spiritual stuff, you know.
I picture. Just to clarify here, guys, I'm not saying this is true. This is my made up story in my head. I picture. George, you did say that George was kind of intimidated by them as songwriters, which I mean he should be. They're like 2 of the greatest of all time. But I picture him working on songs, and he brings them songs, and they kind of go, "Great, George, great, that's great, good job."
That's the way it was.
And then every once in a while, he brings them one, and then he plays,
right,
you know, something, and they go, "Holy shit!" You know, we're
can you
doing
say that on live.
Yes, you can.
You can. Shit.
We're on Facebook.
Yeah, which is incredible. You know, even Frank Sinatra said that was his favorite, so to speak. He said that was his favorite Lennon McCartney song. He had no idea that George wrote it. Well, that was the highest compliment. I mean, you know,
it's
great.
It's one of the greatest love songs of all time.
I agree.
Did he write? Did you say "While My Guitar Gently Weeps"?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Here Comes the Sun.
How do you write that?
It's just incredible stuff.
Well, he was an incredible talent,
brilliant.
and it just blows me away that the way that their music was so amazing. It feels like, look, Debbie Russell said, "Hi, Joe."
Hi, Deb.
But you know, it's like they took two of the greatest songwriters of all time, and put them in the same band, and they could get along. Yeah. And that's incredible. I mean, you know what I mean?
You know,
like
every Beatles LP from the beginning to pretty much the end, you know, the way John and Paul did it is George had to have a song and Ringo had to have a song, basically for their fans, because
Yep.
the LPs and this were basically for their fans. So the first LP, George wasn't writing at that point, so John and Paul wrote "Do You Want to Know the Secret," and gave it to George, and George sang it, which is a great song. But John and Paul wrote it.
I didn't know George sang that one. I haven't listened to that one in so long.
But you can see as time
do you guys ever
progressed.
do that one?
Yeah, we do. You can see how time progressed, and one song per album. Same thing with Ringo, and then we get into the White Album where he's got 3 or 4 songs, and Abbey Road where he's got Here Comes the Sun, Something, all this great stuff. And then you get into Let It Be. He's got Old Brown Shoe, and it's just incredible songwriting. He grew.
I know that social media is way different these days, and artists are under more scrutiny and stuff. But it is cool to respect a band like that, and there to other than a rough breakup and stuff. There's not a whole lot of what am I trying to think? Like there's not a whole bunch of drama surrounding them. There's not these stories of how one of the guys knocked up 7 women, or nobody, going spent 3 years in prison, or tried to tell everyone they're Jesus, or
Exactly.
They seem like great guys. And Paul, you know way more about Paul than me, man. When I watch Paul, like today, even like do an interview or be on stage, and I got to see Paul in 2002 when he did it back in the U.S. tour, and I think it was 2002, and it was the greatest concert I've ever seen.
Wow.
I mean, it was absolutely. I thought. I had just recently seen Another Legend, and the show was good and it sounded perfect, but it was like 85 minutes. It kept having different band members would come on and off stage, bring out a trumpet section, and at that time I had a 4-piece kind of rock and roll band, and so I was really into the like band camaraderie, like we're a band, and it's like everybody's coming and going the whole time, and it was a perfectly put together show, and it sounded good, but I was really kind of let down. And he's one of my favorites, and I don't even want to say the name just because it's going on the internet. But so I assumed when I'm going to see Paul, and I'm thinking about, man, with those arrangements on those songs and all that stuff, like there's going to be like 17 people up there, and it was like a 5-piece band, and not one guy left the stage once, and they didn't have one guest appearance, and they went for 2 hours and 55
and how long
minutes.
Did he sing?
2 hours and 55 minutes.
And did he ever take a sip of water? No.
And so he would switch. He starts off the show. He walks out. I think. With hello, or what's the name
Hello,
of that
Goodbye.
song? Hello Goodbye. Yeah,
he
starts off the show with Hello Goodbye. He's got the Hofner bass, and rocking it right at the front of the stage.
The original Hofner bass.
Yeah.
Same one from the Ed Sullivan Show.
And they rock it out. He stays on bass a couple times, and then he goes and switches over to piano. Well, then guess what? One of his lead guitar, we have 2 guitar players. One of them picks up a bass. They don't bring out another bass player.
No.
And he rocks it out.
And all in the same key. No switching keys like Elton John or the Stones. All in the original keys.
And they have this amazing. They have this amazing keyboard player.
Wicks.
That's playing all the horn sections. I'm sure some of it's recorded, but
still,
it was amazing with a 5 or 6 piece band. They played. I mean, they played stuff off Sgt. Pepper's. You can't do that. I mean, it was amazing.
I saw him, I think, in '92 at the Astrodome. I think, maybe it was '93. And then at Minute Maid Park, I think it was 2012, and I got to go to the sound check. So I got there around 3 o'clock. I think there was about 50 people there. So a little intimate sound check thing. Paul comes up on stage, and here we are, like 5 rows in, empty stadium,
You're hanging out that close to Paul McCartney?
Yeah. We couldn't take pictures or anything like that, so we're looking, he's doing a sound check, hello, waving to the crowd and talking and stuff like that, And, he does a song, he tests his mic and his bass and stuff, and he says, "How did that sound?" And I can swear he's looking right at me, So I said, "It sounded great," And Paul then says, "I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to the sound man behind you." I've about died because Paul
talked to you.
Said something to me.
You've talked to Paul McCartney.
Well,
my
life was complete then.
I don't blame you.
Paul said he wasn't talking to me, and that was good enough.
That's amazing.
That's good enough. Anyway, amazing. Which is crazy. So,
by the way, guys, y'all tuned in. I'm hanging out with Joe from the Fab5, and I don't know what time it is, and he's got a show in a little bit. Oh, you got to watch. We got like 3 minutes.
3 minutes, yeah.
We got like 3 minutes.
I'm hanging out with Matt from Main Street Crossing.
That's right.
One of the greatest venues to see any live music in Houston.
And by the way,
every seat is a great seat.
Look at this.
It's a Fab5 shirt.
Sporting my new Fab5 shirt. What's your website, Joe?
It's www.thefab5, which is a 5. .net, N-E-T. And then we're on Facebook. Just look up the Fab5. You'll see a little capital logo with a British flag, and you'll find us pretty easily.
So you guys play here like 3-4 times a year.
Sure.
Have been for the last 3 or 4 years or something.
It's one of our favorite places to play. The sound production is fantastic. Shane
is the bee's knees, man. He's the best. And the bad thing and the good thing for you guys is they sell out like every time. So you need to go on our website or their website and see when they're coming here next.
Just so come to every show. Come to every show at Main Street Crossing. Great ticket prices, great music, national acts, local acts, tribute bands, every genre of music. Main Street Crossing is the place to be in Tomball.
Okay, so
great food and booze too.
That's true. I'm going to respond to Larry real quick. In My Life, Larry, is one of the greatest Beatles songs, and by the way, has my favorite piano solo of all time.
Yeah.
And it's only like a one-hand piano solo. It's not even that complicated.
People always thought it was a harpsichord, but actually the solo on the record...
What is it?
It's George Martin playing a regular piano. The tape was slowed down, and George played bong ba da dun 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 ba ba bum 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 bum. Recorded the bit, sped the tape back up to normal pitch, and it's dum ba da dum 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 dum.
I love that.
Impossible to play live. It's almost like, well, it's a struggle for us because sometimes it comes out great, sometimes it's a couple of bad notes. But
that's amazing.
It's all right because it's two-handed. Boom, da, 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 da. You have to be a really good piano player, so to speak. Could have came out wrong. Sorry. To do it right, it's very difficult.
Hi, Lisa. Lisa's saying hi.
How you doing,
okay,
Lisa?
Joe. Before we have to get off here, because you got to go get ready to go on stage and rock this place out.
But I am ready.
Well, I know, but I want to hear. Okay, so I'm a big Beatles fan, but you're like a Beatles historian. I mean, really.
I do. I love the Beatles.
I want to hear like one more thing that like just almost nobody knows, like something that when you found out about it, when you read about it, when you came across it, that you were like,
wow. Oh, okay.
Yeah, like a wow, like, oh my gosh, I had no clue.
Out of the whole Beatles catalog, what song did Paul not play at all?
He played nothing on it?
Nothing on it, yeah.
What? Why?
It would be off Revolver, and the song was She Said, She Said, which is a John song. George played bass because Paul was at a club that night, and he couldn't make the session, so George played bass on that song. So Paul doesn't even appear on that song at all. So it's all George, John, and Ringo. She said, I know what it's like to be dead. Great song. So, but no, Paul's not on it at all.
Was George also a good bass player, or did he just kind of fake it?
No, George and John
I played a little bass on a song on a record once, and it was just, I can't play bass. No, it's terrible. No, we got it fine because nowadays with Pro Tools, you can just like, all I have to do is hit the right note and we can move it around.
Well, George and John both started playing bass. Actually, it started on Sgt. Pepper. John played bass on Fixing a Hole.
That song
which is
so
kind of
good,
crazy because
man.
Paul played harpsichord. A lot of that stuff was on 4-track, so you could only do it live with 4 guys and then overdub, once or twice. Not like today if you record everything separately. So George first on She Said, She Said, played bass. Then John on Fixing a Hole. And then from there, once we get to the White Album, John played bass on Helter Skelter. Paul played drums on Back in the USSR.
No way, I didn't know that.
Ringo had left the band for a short period, and Paul being
is Ringo not on that song at all?
No. And Paul, being the perfectionist he is, can play every instrument. Play drums on it, and you can tell by the drumming style it's not Ringo. It's a little bit.
It's still good though.
It's everything is good. Everything is good. So of course John and George did a lot of bass from '68 onwards. Hey Jude is George playing bass, Paul's playing piano. Long and Winding Road is John playing bass. Let It Be is John playing bass. So they were a great band made out of 4 pieces of the puzzle together. They were incredible. If you took one of those pieces out, I don't think it would be the same.
Well, it wasn't the same when they broke up eventually, right. And Paul still made great music. John still made great music. So did George and Ringo. They've all done some great things. But
the other three helped Ringo as much as they could because he wasn't a songwriter, so they would.
Right, but they didn't find the magic. I mean, they never found the magic again.
No,
I mean, it was like,
no.
I mean, they were the 1991 Chicago Bulls. I mean, like you couldn't, or the 27 Yankees. Like, there's no getting away from it. Okay, but I know we're gonna get off in a minute, but I want to know
Shane Depew.
Oh, Shane, best sound man in the world, baby. And did you see that Lisa? Lisa.
Yes, I do. I do. She's wonderful.
Said, "Hi, Lisa's amazing. She does such a great job." Okay, I want to know the song "A Day in the Life." I know we've already mentioned the song.
Sure.
Do you know what the hell it's about?
Actually,
do you have a guess, or did you read anything?
I do. I read something that John pretty much was reading the paper about someone who died in a car crash. I read the news today. Oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. Tara Brown is his name. Tara Brown was the heiress to Guinness,
Guinness the beer,
as in beer. Guinness.
Well, that's Dos Equis.
Dos Equis, but we'll pretend it's Guinness.
Okay.
Let me
try this Guinness.
We'll pretend we're in a pub right now in Liverpool.
Shane, have one of the waitresses send me a Guinness.
Exactly. So basically, the song was written about him. He died in a car crash. He was one of these high roller bachelor guys who had a lot of money and stuff. And so basically, John read that story of him passing away in a car accident in the paper, and that's how the whole song starts. I heard the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. And the news was kind of sad.
A lot of people think, because I got an argument about this once, a lot of people think that it says about a lucky man who made the grave.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Because it's made the grade, meaning
it's grade, Grade,
like he made it in society,
But I've been in an argument where I'm like, I had to pull up Google and go, look, I'm telling you, it's great.
Yeah. Out of all the Beatles, Paul was the closest to Tara Brown, and hung out with him at the art galleries and stuff in '66. But by 1967, he just almost like James Dean, the same kind of thing. He just driving too fast and with a nice little, I don't know if it was a Jaguar actually. And just, that's it. It was over. Yeah. Yep.
It's terrible.
Guinness.
All right.
Yeah. So that's that story.
Okay. Is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds really? Is it about LSD for real?
No.
What's it about?
I mean, people wanted to make the whole psychedelic drug thing, but basically, I've seen the drawing of Julian in elementary school. And his friend, this little girl who happened to pass away a couple of years ago, Julian kept in touch with her in his later years. She died of lupus, but her name was Lucy, and he drew a picture of his friend Lucy in the sky with diamonds. And if you look on the internet, you could actually see the picture. And John said, well, what's that, Julian? He said, that's Lucy in the sky with diamonds. That's the real reason of why he wrote the song. It just happens to be LSD, but I really don't think John wanted to write about LSD. I mean, he wrote about Dr. Robert years before, which was the real LSD song of this doctor who put, acid in their coffee one night.
I'm acting like I know what you're talking about. I don't. I mean, I know the song, but
when he put acid in their coffee, it was George and John with their wives and stuff, and their first acid trip. This dentist could get LSD because it was legal, and so he tried this, and they had a trip for 8 hours. They went out clubbing and. They said they were in an elevator in a club, the St. James Club, the Scotch. I don't know what it's. I forget the name of the club. I'll have to look it up. But anyway, the elevator was melting and everything was melting, and they were all freaking out. They were on acid, and they don't know how they drove home on the M1. Being on acid, which is kind of crazy, but they must have liked it because it said their way of thinking and their mind was never the same after they took acid, and it just, I don't know, they wrote differently. It's just an artistic thing, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, what about Strawberry Fields?
That was an orphanage in Liverpool, and John grew up on Menlove Avenue, close to Strawberry Fields. So he basically wrote about, this orphanage in his hometown, which is still there actually. If you go to Liverpool, which I haven't been yet, one of these days we'll have to take a trip to Liverpool.
I'm down.
Yeah, it'll be good. We'll have Guinness. So it's
great.
basically written about the orphanage there. And funny, the B side or the A side of that 45 was Penny Lane, and Penny Lane was a barbershop in a roundabout, which is a little.
That's great. So Penny Lane's a real place.
It was a real place as well. Barbershop in
because
the same
it
area.
Sounds
Liverpool.
just like a made up. I mean, that's one of the best. The melody. Oh my gosh!
Penny Lane, there is a barber showing.
I love it. I just figured they were sitting around being goofballs.
How you doing, Drew?
Drew said that we need to figure out a way to continue this conversation because it's so good.
You know, I can talk for the next 5 hours, but
that
then
Drew,
they'll miss me inside.
I know we're gonna have to go. And Drew is my sister Katie, who you talked to. Katie.
Yeah.
That's
hi,
her
Katie.
husband.
I love you, Katie.
Drew
really, Drew. I love you too, Drew.
Or that could be Katie. She tunes in on his account. So we don't know if we're talking to Katie or Drew.
The mysterious
one of the
Katie
two.
And Drew.
That's right. All right. Well, we got a show to go do. Well, I don't have to do it. I got to go run the place or something.
You
and
do.
Joe's got to get on stage. And
I love this guy.
One of my favorite bass players in the world, one of the best singers in the world. You're looking at Paul right there. Oh, it is Katie. My name's Matt Davis with Main Street Crossing in Tomball, Texas. This is Joe from the Fab5, greatest Beatles tribute band in the world. Come see them. Come see us.
Support
Get you
live
a
music.
T-shirt.
Support live music, and please come visit Main Street Crossing. Check out their website. Check out their Facebook page. Great music, great bands, great hospitality, and a great staff and great owner.
All right. Oh, you don't know, by the way, the next date that you're here, do you? I mean, I know we have it booked.
I
don't know it off the top of my head.
I don't.
Okay. There is, if you go to our website or the Fab5's website.
Yep. Check the events, and we're there. I think we have three more shows this year.
Yeah, so they're here about every 3 months, and I'm telling you, if you're a Beatles fan, it's like the greatest show ever. If you don't like the Beatles, I don't know why you're still watching this, and you won't like the show. But if you like the Beatles, it's the best thing you can see since the Beatles are no longer. So, love you guys. Joe, Matt, we are out.